Jesus Revolution is the latest film from Lionsgate. It comes to us from directors John Irwin and Brent McCorkle. This film is about the Jesus Revolution in the early 70s in Southern California. It features the life of Greg Laurie, who is of Harvest Christian Fellowship, a massive church in Southern California, and how it came to be. It stars Kelsey Grammer, who does a fantastic job in this film. It has a huge theme in this film about forgiveness, reconciliation, the gender gap, coming to terms with someone next to you who you don't want to be with, but yet you're kind of forced to be with them, all kinds of things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a love story, not just between a man and a woman, but between Christ and his church. Yes, so this film is a powerful film. Many themes on it. It stars Joel Courtney, Anna Grace Barlow, Jonathan Rumi of The Chosen, Kimberly Williams Paisley, and the aforementioned Kelsey Grammer, who plays Pastor Chuck Smith, whose whole life changed the minute he accepted a hippie into his house. And I can't wait to talk about it on my next Conservative Take. If you're unfamiliar with the way I do my movie reviews, then please check the link right here, and that will explain everything. Also be mindful that there will be a spoiler section in case you don't want to know too much about the film. That will be denoted right here. So for the story in this film, Jesus Revolution, I'm going to give the score a 7 because there is some things in this film that I just had a hard time following in terms of the narrative, but I forgive it because it's a biopic pick. It's a pick about a person, and his story and his perspective is taken through the eyes of Greg Laurie's character, played by Joel Courtney. It reminds me a little bit of the film Almost Famous, which I wouldn't recommend you seeing. It's a very R film, so if you want to watch that, just be mindful of the kids. But it has the same style of film. It's not really a road flick at all, but it is a road flick in terms of the narrative that this character is on. He's on a journey, a road trip of sorts. And I won't give any details at all other than in the spoiler section. But it's a film that is very heartwarming and is very personal. And the first 15 minutes of the film are extremely powerful. I will try and touch on that a little bit in the Conservative Take section. But I will say this, that the film, again, has themes of reconciliation, has themes of gender gap. They call people squares. You know, are you hip or are you square? And there is some situational things that happen in the film that should be mindful for kids because you don't want your kids to see certain things. It's pretty dramatic. It has a PG-13 rating, so I recommend that you keep some younger kids at home, but it's still at its heart a Christian film, and it has a lot of redeeming values. It shows the human spirit and human depravity. Regardless of what you think about people, they do have their flaws. I have my flaws, and it is what it is. So this film has no problem showing that. So in terms of story, I think it was fantastic. But again, I give it a 7 only because it was hard for me to mesh some of stuff together. But I forgive a lot of that simply because of the type of film it was trying to be. So for the emotional impact in this film, I'm going to give it a 7, mainly because my emotions were really at this height right within the first 20 minutes of the film. Kelsey Grammer's character is just absolutely phenomenal. The subtleties in his acting are fantastic. I didn't know he had that in him. I know him from Frasier, from Cheers, but he is such a talented actor and he plays it straight. And when he feels an emotion, it's genuine, it's real. And you can see just the inflection with he and his wife and how that subtlety is there. And so that when things hit him, you know it hits him, and it hit me the same way. But mainly in that first 15 minutes, it was for me, and at the very end, because this is, after all, a love story, and it had a really good conclusion of, again, reconciliation. So for the category of intangibles, I'm going to give this film an 8. I think it did a really good job in several categories. Number one, I think it did a really good job with the musical score. They actually got real songs. And sometimes when you have a film that's low budget, it's hard to get those rights to those songs. But they spared no expense and got some really good music. And also the score itself was fantastic. It was lit very, very well. If you look at that poster right here in front of me or in back of me, you'll see that how it's lit. It's like that orange, reddish, brownish earth tone, very understated, but very, very well done. The directors did a fantastic job there. And that just takes you back in time where you think things are peace and love and happiness. But again, this film has some themes that take us to a time where there's hopelessness and depression and other things too, drug abuse. And those core issues are a lot of core issues that these kids today are facing. And I thought that pulls that stuff together. Also, I think the acting was fantastic. And I'm going to point out Kelsey Grammer again, because I related to him probably the most of anyone in there, probably because I'm closest to age with him. But yeah, his character was fantastic. A guy who was out on his own, took a risk on somebody. His church was dying. He wanted to reach out, even though he didn't want to do it. It was almost forced upon him, and he ended up embracing it, and it became what it is today. And of course, Greg Laurie came from that. So fantastic film. Those intangibles are there, and I think it's definitely worth watching for those reasons, if for no other reason at all. And so for the category of watchability, I'm going to give this film an 8. And I'm going to touch back on a little bit, back to Kelsey Grammer, because it's, to me, the main reason why I would want to watch this film all over again is because of Kelsey Grammer. And I think the whole thing drives through him. You know, it's definitely through the Greg Laurie character's eyes, but really it's a Pastor Smith story. It's his initiative and his passion and his obedience to do something out of the box, to invite these hippies into his church, despite the fact that his congregation and his core congregation, who have all the money, may not like it. So to me, another thing about this film is the redemptive value of it, the story of second chances, third chances, fourth chances, and people are frail, and we have to figure out ways of getting along and forgiving them. But the only way to really do that is through a relationship with Jesus Christ. So this film has those core themes, but again, to go back to me, to watch this film, to watch Kelsey Grammer all over again is well worth it. So for my overall score of this film, I'm going to give it an 8. And right now, I'm not going to say much more about the film. I'm going to save that for the conservative take section, because everything I want to say about this film is going to go into spoiler territory, and I don't want to do that if you do not want to see that. So if you don't want to see that, click in the chapters below, and there will be a section for spoiler section. Skip over that and click on the final take section, where I'll wrap this video up and give some insights about this film without giving you any spoilers. So here we are in the spoiler section, and I'm going to jump right into it with the elephant in the room, and that is the character played by Jonathan Roumie. His name was Lonnie Frisbee. Now, if you don't know anything about Lonnie Frisbee, you would know that he was a dude with serious issues who had problems. And then he professed a relationship with Christ and started this movement in this church with Chuck Smith. And so they came together, and he mentored Pastor Greg Laurie. And what I like about this film is that they actually decided to bring out the charisma movement in the church, which I don't prescribe to. You may prescribe to it yourself, but I do not. And I don't believe Greg Laurie does either, because they have a hard knock on that theology. And if you don't know what that is, you can look it up for yourself. But that's what's interesting, because that kind of came as a shock. So when this person, Lonnie, comes on the scene, he's nice, he's mild-mannered, he's funny, he's charming. You've seen his actor play on The Chosen, so how bad could he be, right? But he is a dark soul in some ways. He's human. And we see that a little bit later. His wife and he have arguments, and things don't look quite as hunky-dory as it did in the beginning. So they're showing a true picture of a real person. And so I think that was cool. And again, the theatrics of his presentation, was he being prideful? Was he just trying to be showy? And the whole healing thing was definitely a charismatic style of presentation that Chuck Smith was like, no, we are not going to do that, because we have to maintain a ministry. So it was tempering down that. I thought it was pretty brave to do that, because today people don't like hearing some things about their church that they don't want to see. So that was really good. And one more thing that hit home for me was Lonnie doing it for God, or was he doing it for himself? And that was a question that, to me, I asked many times as I was coming up in my Christian faith as a young adult. And so that's a key issue that I think a lot of people need to look into, about Are you doing this for yourself? Or are you doing this for God truly? And that's a question that needs to be worked out for every Christian, I believe. Also, the film deals with relationships between a mother and her son. That was tough because Greg Laurie's character was constantly being abandoned, was being left. And then he found something else out, which I won't give the plot point there, but something was different from his mother and himself that he didn't know about. And that caused even more strain on him, strain with the pastor a little bit, and also strain with Lonnie and some strain with his girlfriend. In fact, a lot of strain with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's father. So yeah, there's that too. And then you have a situation where you have the father and the daughter being reconciled together and coming to Christ because of that. Then you have the son and the mother doing the same thing. That's very similar. And then you have Kelsey Grammer's character, Chuck Smith, and his daughter doing kind of the same thing. So there's a lot of reconciliation going on there. It's very, very well done in terms of themes. And then I think another key point for me was Kelsey Grammer feeling like the old man in the room, but yet feeling strongly enough that this could work, that it was something that God wanted him to do. We stepped out from himself, from being too comfortable and embracing these wacky hippies, and it was a walk of faith, and it was really good. And his temperament was so cool. It wasn't like he was freaking out. He's like, look, why are you in my house? And it was like really cool. I like that about it too. He just played it straight and was like, whatever. And so that was awesome as well. And one thing in this film I want to touch on, and I'll be remiss if I didn't talk about this, was the undertone of Marxism entering into the college campus, and also some other unsavory types of theologies. And I'm talking about the devil worship guy right before Lonnie went to speak. But there was a scene that I want to talk about specifically. It was a black guy who was talking about Christianity in a negative connotation. And you didn't hear a lot of it. I heard what he was saying because those people are the circle that I went around, much of them in my college days. Even though I didn't believe them, I hung around these kind of people who twist history into making Christianity something that's bad, calling it a white man's religion. And of course, the takeaway is that they're wrong, and that the solution is true Christianity and giving it in its true context. And that's what we need to do. That's what the church needs to do, is teach true Christianity with sound doctrine so that it won't be misinterpreted by these radical groups trying to underpin and undermine this country. All right, now for the final score for this film, I'm going to give it a 15.5, which translates to 3.5 stars and a go for Jesus Revolution. This film was great. I saw it just a few hours ago, and I'm happy I did. I didn't know anything about it going in. I was going into it totally dark, didn't watch the trailer. In fact, I still haven't seen the trailer for this film, and I'll probably watch it after I do this. When I edit this out, I'll watch the trailer and see. But yeah, this film is highly recommended for me. I think it's highly needed in today's society because I think it's going to speak so much to so many kids who didn't know that their parents maybe went through these kind of things. And it's true. And these millennials probably have no clue of what it was like in the 60s, because they wouldn't say things are bad now, or they really weren't. Coming off the 60s with the Kennedys and MLK and Vietnam War and this and that and riots here and there. It was a turbulent time in this country. And so maybe we don't have it as badly as we think we do. We shall see. But we do know that Jesus Christ can solve all of that. And that ultimately is the theme of this film, and that Jesus Christ is the answer. And that's the takeaway for this film. So what say you? Do you plan on seeing Jesus Revolution? If you do see it, let me know. Put in the comments what your thoughts are. And if you watch the spoiler section, let me know your thoughts on that, because I'm really curious about that, and if that really angers anybody or what's your thoughts on that. I'd be curious to know, because to me, it's a touchy point, and I think the film was very brave to put it in there. And so with that, I'll see you guys in my next conservative take.